Hello and welcome to Fintech Impact. I'm your host, Jason Pereira. Today on the show, I have Corey Westphal, CEO of Mobile Assistant. Mobile Assistant is an app that enables advisors to dictate notes for transcription and later integration into CRM software. And with that, here's my interview with Corey.
Hello, Corey.
Hi, how are you, Jason?
Good. Thanks for taking the time.
You bet.
Now, Corey, here in Madison, Wisconsin, I was just in Appleton, and if I had been smart enough to connect the dots on that, I would have just driven over to do this in person, but we are doing this remotely.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have you at the office, but maybe next time.
Next time. So, Corey Westphal of not Madison, Wisconsin, but Corey Westphal of Mobile Assistant. Tell us about Mobile Assistant.
Well, Mobile Assistant is designed to provide financial advisors primarily an easy, accurate way of documenting their client meetings. So an advisor gets out of a meeting with a client, they get somewhere quiet. It can be a car, it can be an empty meeting room. And they use our mobile app. They can use our dictation hotline if they'd like to just make a phone call and dictate. But they hit the record button and they speak their notes. They give us a recap of everything that happened during that meeting, everything that they want to memorialize from that interaction they have with their client. And it can be next steps, action items. When they're done, within 8 business hours, our transcriptionists around the country, we employ over 120 transcriptionists now throughout the U.S., and they listen and to the dictation, transcribe it, and send it back. And so we're basically the human version of Dragon, if you will, for the financial and insurance communities.
Yes, the original voice dictation software.
Exactly. And there's just nothing that really replaces the accuracy that comes from a professional human transcriptionist that is actually transcribing a note. I tell people all the time that the software solutions out there are really good for certain things. They're great for grocery lists. They're great for maybe some to-do lists. But when you have a client meeting note that has to be done in an accurate way in order to, from a compliance standpoint, have really an assurance that note has been transcribed exactly from what you said, it really comes down to, needing that human touch when it comes to the technology.
So compliance departments everywhere must love you. Because the number one, it's amazing. A large bank in this country that shall not be named, and their broker dealer, a client of mine worked for a Salesforce consultant and was trying to sell them on this one add-on to Salesforce. And the guy just kind of smiled and nodded and said, let me bottom line for this for you. Here we have this many thousand subscriptions. I can't even get the advisors to put their meeting notes in this system. And I'm sure that is something that is echoed everywhere throughout this industry. And you are basically taking the pain out of that. So I guess let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about the actual experience of utilizing it. You made it very simple. So you said we can phone in or we can use an app. So what does that look like from the time of dictation to the time of delivery? And then we can talk about integrations and other pieces.
Yeah, well, what I'd like to talk about when it comes to the process is really to kind of focus on the mobile application, because from a user experience standpoint, the mobile app has been designed to make that process of capturing the information very, very easy for the advisor. And we have a brand new version of our app that has been redesigned that's getting launched next week. And so the timing of this meeting today was great because I love talking about the new version that we have coming out, because we have something built into it that's brand new that the dictation industry has never seen before. And I think the concept will ring home to your viewers, because it really takes when you talk about taking the pain out of the process, one of the issues when it comes to dictation is even using a mobile app, when you get out of that meeting and you hit the record button, it's up to you to keep your thoughts organized, keep yourself structured in the way that you speak your dictation so that the notes come back and they're exactly the way you want them in the format that you want them. And so that really kind of a process doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. It's not easy to speak in a super organized way for 5 minutes. And so what we've done is we created something called the Assistant that is built into the new mobile app that we have launching next week. And so the Assistant basically is providing a template guide for the person that's using our service. So instead of just hitting the record button, speaking and freeform dictating your notes, now you'll be able to go into the Assistant and be able to pick a template. And we'll have a couple of them that are preloaded, like a general client meeting and an annual review. But you can also create your own. So imagine all the different types of meetings that advisors have, that they can have a specific template that has specific questions that are going to be displayed then on the mobile app as they're dictating. So now the process looks a little bit more like this, where they get out of the meeting, they choose a template. The template has a list of questions that they can scroll through as they're dictating. So now we have a way of helping to guide the advisor through the process. And so once the dictation's done in that process, then they hit submit. And then our transcriptionists are going to have that list of questions from those templates. So they'll have the questions in front of them as they're typing the note. So when the note comes back to the advisor, it's going to be in that template format. And so every note is going to have more structure to it and really kind of tell the story in a really organized way. And so that's the new process that I was excited to talk to you about today. That's really kind of going to change the way people look at dictation.
Well, it's fantastic because essentially you're basically creating the best practice checklist within the app in itself. Right. So, and I think about all the permutations for that of you specifically talk about one thing, like I'm going to make a change in their portfolio or do whatever it is. And basically the ability to then make sure you've addressed every important note or every important area regarding that type of transaction within the note is invaluable. And again, KYC, so the compliance departments must love you because you're keeping their advisors out of trouble as long as they utilize you.
Well, when it comes to compliance officers as well, this is kind of the same story that I hear from every organization, whether it's a broker-dealer we work with or a company that has a large sales force that needs to have a way of capturing the data from those client interactions, is that one of the biggest issues that they have is they have these CRM systems, like you'd mentioned, Salesforce. So we integrate with 8 different CRMs out there. And the reason that we do that is the notes from a compliance standpoint, like the compliance officers need these notes to get into the CRM to make the CRM useful. These CRM systems are so powerful. They have so much information that puts everything in one place, especially financial advisors. But if they don't have the data from those client interactions in the CRM, they're really useless. And so from that aspect of it, I look at like this new assistant template guide. I really do look at it that it's going to be viewed not only from the advisor standpoint, that they have the ability now to really help themselves navigate through the process and keep themselves organized. But we're going to give organizations the ability to also create templates that are pushed out to their reps. So imagine, let's just pick a broker dealer. Imagine an LPL advisor that has templates that have been designed for them from the organization that are available right when they go into the app. And so that's where I think there's going to be a lot of power given to organizations to help with the narrative of what do they need the advisors to document. So instead of just telling the advisor, you need to, from a best practice standpoint, you need to prove that you're being a fiduciary. So we really need you to really document every single meeting, and even giving them our service to be able to use. That's just kind of one part of the process, because the advisor still has to make it part of the routine. They have to make it a habit. And so it's still, the onus is still on the advisor to really make that process happen after every client meeting. So giving them some stepping stones, if you will, in the form of templates, I think organizations are going to look at that as really something that will really help the advisor get the process done.
I'm curious, have you had any conversations around templating and machine learning? Because many of the companies I've talked to lately about this sort of thing, they're finding ways to at least categorize the client responses or meetings. And in order to do that, in order to actually have actual machine learning data, they can create these templates. So I would think what you're talking about there, was that started by you guys and then you kind of said, oh, look, this machine learning thing might actually pan out? Or was this a request from the beginning?
Yeah, the idea came from one of our larger clients that has over 1,000 other reps that are using us. And they have templates that are designed that they recommend and they encourage the reps to utilize after their client meetings. And so what they asked us to do is they asked us to see if we could find a way of helping to guide the advisor through that template process without having a piece of paper with them. And so what we looked at, okay, how do we incorporate the concept of templates where you have to have the template in front of you and you follow along and you dictate according to that and to that format? How do we incorporate that into the mobile app? And that's where it really came to life, where I brought the idea to my new product team that I just started working with a couple of years ago, and we really got it into the hands of some technology experts that could look at it and say, hey, this is a great concept. Let's get some prototypes out there. And then we did a lot of testing with advisors to find out exactly how interacting with that type of feature would work in a dictation app. And so what we ended up coming up with was really very different than where we started. So it really came from the feedback from advisors and how the flow really would happen within those templates. And so to answer your question, it really did come from one of our customers that was looking for a way to help guide their reps through the use of templates that they had designed for them.
And then you stumbled upon the fact that, hey, this artificial intelligence stuff may actually have some relevant use for that. So,
when it comes to AI, right now, Mobile Assistant doesn't utilize any voice to text software or translation other than the human transcriptionists that do our work. And so our professional transcriptionists do such an amazing job as far as the accuracy of the notes that are delivered back. We haven't incorporated any type of AI in our platform. Now, that may change a little bit down the road, where one of the things, the first step in that process, we are right now going through the process of migrating our entire platform from an on-premise data center to AWS. AWS, for those that don't know, is the cloud, Amazon cloud, basically. That is going to give us a lot of technology that we don't have access to now when it comes to the AI that's available through Amazon, especially. And so that process is going to be complete, and that migration will be complete early next year. And then my thought is to really start to look at how we can maybe use some voice learning to help our staff with the production that we have to do for our customers.
It's interesting. I've seen iterations of that type of technology used in various places, and I find that it's very hit or miss, at least this stage in the game. I would think that probably some advisors, the clarity of their speech would be suffice, that it would basically pick up every last word that they said, and others you would just be 100. I think you probably have a spectrum there of 100% automated to 100% human and points in between. But I would think for you specifically as a business owner, that would be an exciting prospect, because that helps keep your staffing costs down and helps expedite the process.
Yeah, one of the things I'll say when it comes to that is it's always going to be a combination in my mind. There might be some technology that we could utilize to help us on the front end with some dictation from some customers. There'll probably be a percentage of customers that, like you said, speak really clearly, and so they'd be great candidates to be able to maybe run the dictation through some kind of voice learning program to start. But there's always going to need to be that human component that is going to re-listen to it and edit that note to make sure that what was spoken is actually translated accurately. I really think that there will always be the human aspect. That's what makes Mobile Assistant different. If we all of a sudden just started using a voice software, for instance, for our notes, then we'd be no more accurate than the Dragons of the world or the Series of the world. And that's not what our business model is. Our business model is producing and delivering back an incredibly highly accurate note that's 99.9% accurate for our clients.
Yep. And as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself of so many companies who, what you're really not selling, you're not selling transcription services, you're selling accuracy. That's really what you are doing. So I totally get that. So basically, I've dictated into this. It goes off to a transcriber. That person, what kind of turnaround are we looking at in terms of timing?
Yeah, so we promise 8 business hours turnaround time. We operate more like around 4 or 5 business hours, and because we have human transcriptionists doing the work, it does fluctuate throughout the year. So imagine the busiest times of the year for advisors out there. So right before tax time, right in the spring, always super busy, and it probably will be 8 business hours before we can deliver the notes back. If you dictated something right now with our service, you'll have it back in about 2 hours. And so it just kind of depends on the time of year and where our work volume is. But we always we're increasing our staff by 20% in August and September. And the reason why we're doing that is to stay ahead of the production requirements that we have, especially with the new version of our app that we really do think it's going to make a huge difference in the industry. So we're going to make sure that we're going to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to how many dictations we actually are producing a day.
Yeah, I mean, it's smart. It sounds like you're overpromising and delivering, but what you're really doing there is you're managing your work, create a buffer and managing your workflow, right? I guess I'm willing to bet that there's internal thresholds that once you get to like 6.5 hours on average, you look to hire more people or something to that effect, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I've been in the transcription industry for 20 years, and we've always had the same challenge, which is making sure we have enough work for our transcription staff to keep them employed full time, and balancing that out with making sure our customers are receiving their notes back within the expected time range of 8 business hours. And so there's always that balancing act of making sure I'd much more rather have our notes delivered back within 2 hours, but we have to make sure we also don't run out of work for our transcription staff. So it's a balancing act.
Good. So transcriptionist goes over everything, reviews it, sends it out. What are the different methods of delivery?
Great. So the email delivery that we start with it's done through a TLS encryption protocol. So the dictations is secure, it's accurate. The note that comes back then gets sent back in the body of the email. That's the default. Advisors can also choose to have the note sent back as a Word document attachment. And then lastly, if they have a CRM that we integrate with, we not only email the note back, but we also deliver it to the CRM. And we deliver it to the different CRMs in a few different ways. Some of them are a little bit more advanced, where the advisor can actually dictate the it's going to be an activity, and we can create an activity in that CRM, or they can have a note that's delivered directly to the contact record. So depending on which CRM is kind of depends on what our capability is with the integrations that we have. But the CRM integration, I think, is definitely key to making the process of dictation really the most efficient, so that you don't have to do any cutting pasting into the CRM system. We just integrate with those CRMs so that the notes go right where they need to go.
And that's great. So what you're saying is, depending on the CRM, even the action items, you'll create the tasks for that client as well.
One of the biggest enhancements that we made with some of our CRM partners over the years was not to just have the notes delivered to a general landing area in the CRM where the advisor then had to go into that note and then assign it to a contact record or make an activity out of it. So now we have the ability with these integrations of driving exactly what type of note is delivered to the CRM. So for instance, using one of our CRM partners, I can get out of a meeting and actually say, make this an activity, and then dictate next steps, action items that go in to the CRM as an activity, which is basically listed as a things to do today section. And so I have now the ability to have some communication to maybe my internal staff to let them know these are the different things that have to happen after that meeting. And then I can also just dictate a note that goes right to the contact record. So a lot of advisors will dictate two different types of notes after their meetings. They'll dictate the note that goes right to the contact record, which is the recap of the meeting, everything that they want to memorialize from a compliance standpoint to have in the note section for the contact. And then they'll dictate another note and they'll make it an activity that are the follow-up tasks, the next steps. And so it gives them the ability to really streamline the note-taking process so that they have the recap done, but then they also have those next steps that are communicated to maybe their assistant. And so that process works really well with some of our CRM partners that have that basically enhanced integration, if you will.
And the less the advisor has to do after the meeting, the happier they're going to be.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And and a lot of advisors that do have assistants look at it as a way of helping that communication of what needs to happen, so they don't get back to the office and then have to have a kind of a follow-up meeting with their assistant on the tasks that have to get done. They can communicate that while they're out meeting with their clients, so that when they get back to the office, those next steps or action items have already been acted upon, and it just really streamlines the whole communication within the office place.
Fantastic. So the big question, and it's always a big question with every company I deal with, do you get any pushback on security or confidentiality issues?
Absolutely. So I had mentioned that I'd been in the transcription industry for 20 years. So 20 years ago, I started a company that was a medical transcription company. So we worked for doctors and physicians and hospitals around the country for about 16 years exclusively. And so because of that background, the security that we had in place for our system, we were a HIPAA compliant company. And so even though HIPAA is not a term that's really in the financial industry, it is a security term that most people recognize. And so those were the standards that we really built our system on when it comes to mobile assistant. And so for mobile assistant now in the financial space, we take the confidentiality and the security of the data and the notes just as highly secure as we did with medical records for all those years. And so with all of the different regulations that are out there for financial advisors, we get put through a lot of that scrutiny as well when we start to work with broker dealers to make sure that they're satisfied with the security that we have in place for the records that the advisors are going to dictate. So absolutely, it's a huge deal when it comes to making sure we keep track of the notes for all of our advisors and make sure that they're locked down, they're confidential and secure.
Yeah, and I think generally, if you're okay for medicine, you're probably okay for everything else. Maybe national security is above that. That's basically it.
Yeah. One of the improvements with the security of our service, it comes in the form of the new version of the mobile app. So the technology that's out now when it comes to building these mobile applications for iPhones and Androids, the two-factor authentication, it really is a big improvement for the security of the mobile application. So we've got that in place now with the new version that's getting released next week. And I think that'll make a big difference as well for people's just confidence that when they do log into the app, that they know that it's a secure way of really communicating those client notes to us.
Yeah, I drive my staff crazy with two-factor. Every time there's a way to put it on Google Authenticator, it's there, and you're just like, if I forget my phone, too bad, go home.
Yeah. Well, it's worth it. It's worth it. That extra security step is a big deal.
Yeah, no, it's when you're talking about an all-in-one proposition of either you're either compromised or you're not, and compromise has a big negative impact. It's big.
Yeah.
So now, do any of your clients basically request the actual recording as well? Is that a standard feature, or how does that work?
Yeah, so up until now, the recording of the dictations has been available through the notes section online. So if you log into your account through a mobile assistant's website, you'll see the recording there and you can replay it. One of the things and a new enhancement to this new mobile app is we actually are making it available now within the notes section on the mobile app for them to play back the audio. And so it's a cool new feature that if a note, for instance, is pending, so let's say I dictate a note and it's a couple hours later and there's some information in that note that I want to be able to listen to get that information quickly, and I don't have the transcribed note back, I'll be able to go into the mobile app, talk it, and be able to go to the notes section and actually listen and play back the dictation that I already submitted that hasn't been transcribed yet. So some good improvements to that. I think some people are definitely going to find that's a useful feature to be able to go back and replay their note through the audio.
Absolutely. So in terms of the different groups, so feedback. So tell me what kind of feedback you get first and foremost from advisors.
So the feedback that we get from advisors is not only that it's saving them time, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? You're not having to type your notes. You can speak much faster than most people can type. But not only the time savings, but one of the biggest kind of untalked about or not talked about benefits of dictation really comes from the amount of information that's captured that reveals opportunities for advisors. So we've been told from advisors that not only does it save them time, but they're all of a sudden they're revealing more opportunities that are great opportunities for their clients that they never would have known before because they just have so much more detail in the client meeting notes that they have. So when you dictate a meeting note immediately after a client meeting, there's so much more detail that you have in your short-term memory if you do that within the first hour. If you wait even an hour after a meeting, 2/3 of your short-term memory is gone. And so for us, it's really important to communicate to advisors and make sure to encourage them to make this part of their process immediately after their client meetings. And so I think that's kind of one of the biggest benefits of dictation that advisors have told me over the years, that they're just getting so much more detail from those client meeting notes, and it's making a huge difference in their asset growth.
And it's interesting because you're absolutely right. Time and process after the meeting of the process of dictating notes or just handling the notes is hugely important. And I've been told in the past, quite simply, you go to court, the first thing they're going to challenge is the validity of the notes, right? Because it's not what you can say, it's what you can prove. And if you have notes that the person doesn't, you're in a better position. So that's the argument for taking notes in the first place. But the other part of it is they then attack the process of the notes. So when do you write these? Oh, you write them at night and you had a meeting at 9 a.m. and you're sitting down at 7 p.m. You think that maybe you would remember everything that happened? Would you have breakfast this morning?
Right.
All kinds of things, right? So being able to establish a systemized process whereby it's meeting notes, and done as quickly as possible, and being able to show that pattern only protects you yet again as robustly as possible. So the advisors are one thing. Any feedback from the assistants in general?
Yeah, so you'd be amazed how many assistants out there are tasked with the job of having to transcribe notes from their advisors. And so most assistants out there are not okay with it, but they do it as part of their job. Yeah. But the amount of time that they spend having to go back to the advisor and say, hey, what did you mean here? What did you say? I can't understand you here. Replacing that task with a professional service like ours saves that assistant so much time because they're not having to go back to the advisor to have to clean up the notes. If the advisor used a service or maybe a voice software that doesn't do an accurate job, then the assistant, again, has to go back to the advisor to clean up the notes, to edit them. And so taking that off of the assistant's plate, really, we hear really good things from the assistants out there. They're pretty happy. I tell advisors all the time, give your assistant a Christmas present this year and take that off of her plate, because I promise you, she'll thank you for it.
That's right. Your subscription fees are coming out of their Christmas budget, their Christmas gift budget. I'm sure that they'll probably prefer that.
Yeah. Yeah. And to circle back, Jason, on the security aspect of it, sure, of the notes and the compliance aspect. So every dictation that's done from our service is time and date stamped. So the note that is delivered back has the date it was dictated, when it was transcribed, and by our company, and by who specifically at our company, the ID, if you will, for the transcriptions. And so when it comes to any kind of issues that might come up, when it comes to clients questioning things or questioning some recommendation that was done, being able to print off documentation of client meetings that are time and date stamped like that, it makes a huge difference. The compliance officer looking at it sees very clearly that it was done by a third party and it was time and date stamped of when that was actually typed and transcribed. And we keep an archive of every dictation that we do. And so we've had advisors over the years that have asked us to give access to be able to have a document shown to their compliance officer, for instance, that's memorialized because you can't change it on their account through our site. So
interesting. I mean, yeah. Again, it's what you can prove, and clearly you're creating a wall around that, and then definitely proving what you can prove. So we've gotten a chance to go up the chain in terms of compliance officers and your broker dealer partners. What is their feedback, and what do they like? What they think? What do they like about what you're providing?
Yeah. Well, what we hear is that our service gives them a way of helping the advisor to document more. And that's, at the end of the day, really what is so important, is that they need that information from the advisor. And so just telling advisors that they need to document more, that doesn't really help the process because they're not giving them a solution. So what we really do hear from the companies we work with and the compliance officers is we finally have a way of giving the advisor the tool that they need to really help them through the process and make it less cumbersome and make it easy. Every advisor out there has a phone and they can speak. So giving them something that's that intuitive and very easy to use to start implementing that very next day. They don't have to take a course to learn how to dictate. They just have to pick up the app, hit record, and just really be comfortable just recapping and speaking their notes comfortably. So knowing that the notes will come back and they're accurate, that's definitely a huge plus for the advisor, but it's a huge plus for the organization, knowing that the notes are coming back are an accurate description of what actually transpired with those client interactions.
So before we wrap up, I have 3 questions I ask everybody to kind of get you thinking. The first one is, if you had one wish for something you can change in your company or in the industry, what would it be?
Interesting. So what I would change if we could, I think it would be, when it comes to dictation, I think it would just be the communication from organizations of the benefits of dictation for advisors. Because when I go around the country and go to different events, I love talking to advisors about what our service can do for them. But it's amazing to me in this day and age how many advisors are still either not documenting at all, or they're handwriting notes, or they're waiting, like you said, until the next day or 2 days later to document a client interaction that they had. And so that would be awareness of the need and the help that dictation can provide advisors would be, I guess, my request if I could ask one of the financial industry.
Yeah, I mean, I often semi-joke and semi-say we don't get sued enough, because if we did, some of these base level things that we should be doing would not be up for debate anymore. And I remember with another advisor at one point, they're like, well, sure, I just let them pile up and then I type them into my CRM at certain points. Like, everything's timestamped, right? You do realize that if you type in your notes a month after that meeting, that it's anyone's guess as to whether or not you decided something went wrong between now and then, and you decided to not put that in there, or you failed to deliver on something and eliminate that. You're just creating questions. Why do that? Just, you brush your teeth every morning. You take notes after every meeting. End of story, right? Like, it should be that, but it's unfortunately. It's funny. One of my more favorite questions for different businesses around here, especially when they're more technological leaps and a lot of work for advisors, what kind of resistance are you encountering? I would hope that being able to talk into your phone is a level of resistance that should be non-existent, but I guess I'm wrong.
Well, it all comes down to a change in a routine, though. So when it comes to any technology out there that advisors look to adopt, there's always going to be some form of resistance when it comes to changing the routine to incorporate that technology. So even though it's a simple process of spending 5 minutes after a meeting somewhere quiet and just opening the app, hitting record and speaking your notes, it's a change in the routine, and it's a habit that has to really be, an advisor has to be committed to it. Now you have to decide, I am going to spend 15 minutes after every client meeting, and I'm going to get somewhere quiet. I'm going to document this interaction. And so even though, it's a best practice, it's something that should be done. A lot of advisors that have best intentions of incorporating dictation, they get busy. They get back to their office after learning about mobile assistant from an event. They get busy. They get back to their office, and they're going from meeting to meeting, and then they're back in their old routine. And so us as a company, that's one of the most important aspects of onboarding new customers, is making sure that they are aware of how to get started and how we can make it easier for them when it comes to the new assistant. Especially, I think from an onboarding standpoint, it's going to really eliminate a lot of those issues of people not sure how to get started or not sure how to structure their thoughts or their notes. Having a template guide to help them through the process could really just be the training wheels, if you will, on getting a lot of advisors started with more documentation that maybe wouldn't have before. So that's one of the benefits, I think, of this new version of our app that I'm so excited about.
Fantastic. Second question, what has been the biggest challenge in getting the company to the point it's at today?
So it almost comes back to that first question, which is really the knowledge from advisors of knowing how dictation can help them. When we first started in the industry, it was amazing to me that there wasn't a lot of dictation. There weren't dictation companies out there. There was a couple. And coming from the medical transcription industry, where every physician in the country basically is dictating, to coming into an industry where it's kind of a new concept. The idea of using dictation to help with client meeting note documentation is really kind of in the early phases of adoption. We have almost 4,000 advisors now that use us throughout the country, but it's such a small percentage of the advisors out there in the country. And so I think one of the things that, at least in the United States, that has really kind of helped that conversation, it's been the DOL rule. Even though the DOL looks very much different than it did when it was first proposed, and it's going to continue to change exactly what it's going to mean for the advisor community. What it's done is it's brought to the forefront to organizations the need to address the documentation that's being done from client interactions. And so I think that really has brought a lot of light to how are client meetings documented and what's the process, how to go about increasing the amount of adoption of a service that can help them.
Yeah. And while DOL rules evolved, I think the CFP board also adopting a fiduciary standard is only going to help you as well. Because adopting a standard is one thing, proving you delivered is something else altogether.
Right. It's an interesting question, which is to be a fiduciary. It's not only proving what you recommended, it's why you recommended it. So those requirements are going to they're going to be increasing over the years. And so I think a lot of advisors out there that knew that documentation and increased documentation was a good idea. I think now more advisors are becoming aware that it's really becoming a necessity for their business. So in order to do that, they look for ways of helping to increase documentation. Do they type more, or do they look for solutions like technology that can help them to increase documentation without costing them more time out of their day?
And the last question is, what excites you the most about what you're working on and keeps you getting out of bed every morning to keep trudging along in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, I tell you, the new version of our mobile app with the new assistant template guide is something that we've been working on for a year and a half. And so imagine a year and a half we've been building up to this release. And I couldn't be more proud of my product team and my staff that have increased the ability for us to be able to handle so much more work that's going to be coming on because of this. We've really had a fantastic last year and a half to get ready for it. And that's really what I'm most proud of is how my team has taken the idea of how do we capture meeting notes in a more efficient way and make it easier for our customers, taken that and really brought that to life in the form of the new mobile app Talk It. I couldn't be more excited about the launch next week. And so that's an easy question.
I think you're not fully truthful there. It's your 2-year-old twins who must get you out of bed most mornings.
Well, they definitely get me out of bed early every day. I guess that gets me.
Not in an exciting way, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Corey, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And thank you for helping make everybody's lives easier.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks for having me, Jason. This has been a pleasure.
So that was my interview with Corey Westphal of Mobile Assistant. I hope you enjoyed that. As always, please take the time to check them out. And as always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Jason Pereira, and this has been Fintech Impact. Take care.
This podcast was brought to you by Woodgate Financial, an award-winning financial planning firm catering to high net worth individuals and their families. To learn more, go to woodgate.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, or find more episodes at fintechimpact.co.